a tight end high because they're convinced they got a steal in James Mitchell. But every big board from last year ranked him on day 3. How much of that was injury and how much was the player?
I like James Mitchell, as a prospect. He was someone that was on my radar pretty early in his college career. Like, okay, this is an NFL player. But I think the injury is what knocked him into day 3. I don't think he would have been a first-round pick at Virginia, but at Virginia Tech, he was productive, flashy athleticism, he is kind of a receiver as a tight end. I think he would have went round 3. So, had he gone round 3, then maybe we're not talking about tight end as much for the Lions. I think it is something to consider why they might. I don't think they take one in the first round. They keep getting mocked one. I just don't think that happens. We talked to Jeff Risdon a couple weeks back, and he mentioned the same thing. So I think Mitchell it could be the starter and work within this offense that doesn't use the tight end as much.
Jeff did mention, while we're talking about Detroit, 2 players not to mock to them: Kalijah Cansey, Keely Ringo. Don't do it.
There you go.
Marist Midi 21 in the Discord asked, if the Jets keep one of their second-round picks, should they go with the offensive tackle in the first round and then come back with a center in the second round?
I'd love it. I think that would be a great Jets draft. They're going to trade for Aaron Rodgers at some point. You gotta protect him. You gotta block for Breece Hall. I think that's the last thing this offense needs. I would love to see them take a Paris Johnson and then follow it up with John Michael Schmitz, with one of these centers that are popping up the board. I think even around 3, they could probably take a center that they could draft, that they could start, if they draft them in round 3. But they're definitely looking hard at some of the center positions. Joe Tippmann from Wisconsin has been a player they've looked at too. So I'd love it. All offensive line. Make it happen.
If you're the Jets in the second round, don't overthink that just because they haven't played center that they can't play center. And I'm looking at Steve Avila from TCU, Cody Mock, North Dakota State, 2 guys that probably going to go in that range. Guys that can play center, I think, in the NFL. So something to monitor there. Let's go on over to Twitter, where some guy named Scott Wright, at Scott Wright MN, says, explain to me like I'm an infant why Michael Mayer, the best player tight end U has ever produced. And I think Fred was throwing some shade at him there.
On Twitter today.
How is Michael Mayer not a lock for tight end 1 in the top 15 overall? Scott will hang up and listen.
I mean, look, had we come into this year and you said Michael Mayer is not going to be a top 20 pick, I'd have been like, what? That doesn't make much sense. His career's been so good. I think this tight end class, like we talked about with running back, I think it's what hurts is I don't need to take Michael Mayer at 15, right? I could take Tucker Kraft or Sam Laporta or Luke Musgrave in round 2, round 3. I'm good. I don't need him. I think that is what's knocking the value of him. I also think, he's not an elite athlete. There's so many elite athletes at the tight end position in this class. Michael Mayer is a very good athlete. And I think in a lot of classes, that's what he'd be, but he's 249 pounds. He tested fine in the vert and the broad and the shuttle and the 3-cone, but it's not big green Raz numbers here. I think it's tough to take a tight end in the top 15 that doesn't have that anymore.
I just think we're going to overthink this guy.
I think we are too. He's going to be great.
Same way we overthought Mark Andrews a couple of years ago. Same thing. I think let's not overthink this deal. He can block, he can catch, he creates separation despite being not a overwhelmingly great athlete. He creates some separation. I don't know. Yeah, he's a very smart player. He is tight end 1 on my board. So I'm with Scott here. I don't know. At RW Franks 15, a couple of questions from him here. What are our thoughts on the 3 Shepherd guys? Tyson Bagent, Joey Fisher, the interior offensive lineman, could be tackle guard, and their running back, Ronnie Brown.
I've been disappointed by Tyson Bagent through this process. I was super high on him before the Senior Bowl. I thought the Senior Bowl film was below average, was putting it nicely. So it was pretty bad. I was like, well, he's probably out. I think of getting drafted, maybe, round 6 or 7, anything can happen. So I think Joey Fisher might be the first Shepherd player drafted. He just had a killer pro day with, was super athletic. I think he ended up in like 96 percentile, something like that. Crazy athlete, probably kicks into the interior. I think he's going to go day 3. And I think Ronnie Brown is very sneaky as well. I know not a lot of people have talked about him, the running back for that team. But when it wasn't Bagent, it was Brown. He tested as a 91% athlete, 233 pounds. He ran a 4.48. I mean, he is fast and big, and he's tough. So I think 7th round, take a shot on a Division II running back. I think it could happen. Shepherd could have 3 guys, all 3 drafted. That'd be kind of wild.
Would that be a first for a D2 school? I don't know. I'm not going to look this up, but
you got to look that. Look, Brian, I know what your weekend is.
Hey, Brian Lamb, if you're watching the show tonight, research that. Has the D2 team ever had 3 players drafted in one draft class? Ronnie Brown at the NFLPA game, when I was watching that game tape, I thought, man, this guy's got a burst. And they had him returning kicks as well. I think that, his special teams, he could add special teams value early. And that if he gets drafted, that's what's going to get him there. But I think he's probably going to end up in that PFA range. Joey Fisher, I'm with you. Anxious to see. I don't have their final official RAS in yet, as their pro day wasn't until last week. So I don't think that's officially in on the big sheet yet, Shane. Ryan also asked, how many running backs do you expect to be drafted in the first 3 rounds? We've talked about running backs a lot tonight. I feel like it's the number I'm gonna settle on is 8. I think you tend to lean higher.
I think 8's probably what I should say. I think that's probably more accurate. I think you're probably right, but I'll go 9. But I think 10's a possibility if someone, swings round 3 for a Sean Tucker, for an Izzy Banaconda, for Chase Brown, one of those kind of guys.
Tank Bigsby's another one I think could swing that.
I think he gets in. I mean, I think he gets in somewhere.
I've got him lower. I mean, I've moved up Banaconda up to 8, RB8 on my board.
Wow, nice. Yeah.
He's on the move. Yeah, so 9 for Shane, 8 for me. Good buddy Nino got a couple of questions for us. He asked one about Mac Jones. We kind of talked about him earlier. He wants to know what are our thoughts on Trey Tomlinson, the cornerback from TCU, and Lance Boykin, the corner from Coastal Carolina.
I mean, Travis Hodges Tomlinson from TCU is such a tough evaluation because he's such a good player. He's a slot corner. He's tough, but he's what, 5'8", 178 pounds, and that's probably maxing it a little bit. He's fast, so I think he gets drafted, but a good playmaker. But I can't put him against CeeDee Lamb in the slot. It just isn't. He isn't gonna have. He's gonna get pushed around. He's not a very physical nickel when he's facing bigger receivers or more athletic receivers. So I have him as a day 3 pick. He's corner 30 for me. And then Boykin, I have a corner 34. I think has less of that explosive ability, but he's kind of taller, leaner, has a little bit of that burst off the snap. I really like his back pedal. But I think he makes a lot of kind of mental mistakes, technique mistakes, footwork mistakes. Just a lot to clean up with him. So I think it's going to be more of a kind of developmental day 3 pick potentially.
I think ball skills and coverage ability gets Trey Tomlinson drafted in the 4th round. His size, I think, keeps him out of the first 2 days. I think if he was 5'10", 180, I think he might have even argued into the first. But at 5'7", 175, no. That you're not selling me on that in the first 2 days. Lance Boykin, great size, but 4.72. that ain't getting drafted, Big Chief.
Sorry. Yeah, I guess that's fair. The 4.72 is not good. Not good.
And here's a Debbie question, or maybe not a Debbie question, but a question for the 2024 NFL draft. Is Notre Dame offensive tackle, I assume he's from Notre Dame here, Joe Alt. That's right. Did I get that right?
You did?
Because I haven't watched him yet. So Joe Alt, Notre Dame offensive tackle. Is he better than any offensive lineman in this year's draft?
I think he will be. Like, I think he is. But, having another year, things can go wrong. So I think I would take, if you're like, okay, you can take right now Broderick Jones, Paris Johnson, or Joe Alt, who's going to be better in a year. I'll still take Broderick Jones and Paris Johnson. We know what they are. They're going to be top 20 picks. I think Joe Alt has that potential to be a top 5 pick. He's one of the best linemen I saw this year. I think him and Olufashanu from Penn State both could be top 10 guys when we get to next year's class. So I'm in on Joe Alt. Pro Football Focus has graded him highly from day one. I think he's played that way for Notre Dame. He does everything really well. He's big. He's athletic. He's tough. I mean, he's such a good left tackle, but things can always fall apart. So you never know in this final year, but I'm in right now.
I'm not unconvinced that Fashanu wouldn't have been OT1 in this draft.
I think it's very possible. Yeah.
Last question from @theProfessorSD. Who should teams avoid like the plague in this year's draft, but seem to be super drawn to?
I'll give you one I think my Steelers might draft. And that's Keely Ringo, the corner from Georgia.
It's Terrell Edmonds all over again, is it?
not hopefully not quite that bad, but it might be it might be Artie Burns all over again. We could do that. But I mean, just watching Ringo get kind of lit up late in the season is just scary for me. Obviously, he has the size and the speed and the athleticism, but I think for a corner, that only gets you so far. You have to be able to read routes and react and mirror what a receiver's doing. And I don't think Keely Ringo does that, has ever done that. He's relying on the physical tools too much. And to me, that's a big red flag. Someone like Sauce Gardner had physical tools. He always knew exactly what the receiver was going to do, right? And that's how he covered them so well. I don't think Ringo does that. So I'm scared if he's there at 32, the Steelers draft him. But I'd stay away.
I was listening to Risden's podcast when he was talking about the two players that stopped mocking to Detroit, and Ringo was one of them. He said Dan Campbell and them speak a lot of MAs in their press conference, which missed assignments. He said whenever you watch Keely Ringo on tape, he is consistently missing assignments. Like you look up and where was he? Why was he not anywhere near the play that seemed? So it's like that's why he's out on Ringo, and it's kind of some of what you said. To me, it's Levis and Richardson. They're the players that teams are super drawn to because of the big arm, and with Richardson because he's a freak athlete. These are quarterbacks that are going to get management and coaches fired.
And I know we're already pretty long, so I won't get into it. But I did have a good conversation on Twitter with Matt Shaw from Draft Sharks about, could we once again be in this process of over hyping these quarterbacks like last year? That maybe Levis and Richardson aren't very good, and maybe NFL teams know it. And now we're seeing Hendon Hooker in the first round, who probably isn't going to go in the first round, but we got to put more quarterbacks there. Like draft night could come and we might not see another quarterback go in the top 10 outside of Stroud and Young. And we're like, oh yeah, that's what it should have been the whole time. Right. So I'm with you. Cause I do kind of wonder, are we the ones hyping those two more than the NFL? We'll see.
I mean, we were doing it last year.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
With Desmond Ridder, with Malik Willis, and maybe not as much Sam Howell, but it was
Matt
Corral. Yeah, I mean that's. But here's the it all comes back to this. If you looked at every NFL team right now, Shane, how many teams do you think are comfortable with the quarterback they have and thinking that they can win a Super Bowl with the quarterback that they have?
I think you're right, but I think we would have said that about Geno Smith in Seattle last year, Jared Goff in Detroit last year. So I think Atlanta's good with Desmond. I don't think Atlanta's even going to look at these. They're going to look at the quarterbacks. I don't think they're going to consider drafting one. I think they're fine with Desmond Ridder. I think a lot more teams might be comfortable with what they have. Washington might be comfortable with Sam Howell. But I think you're right. I think, your team like Tennessee, Indianapolis, like, you probably got to make this move at some point. It would make sense this year. So I'm torn. I'm torn on it. Last year, I only had 2 quarterbacks in my first round. I got torn by some people for that. And that was too many. Yeah, that was one too many.
Yeah. I mean, there it is. Before we get to our final thoughts, I just want to remind everybody of the mock draft contest.